All right, that was the fresh catch of the game. I'm Matt Minich, joined by John Sheeran, and we are talking Bengals, getting you ready for the 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff. John, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Is that Will Jackson on your body again?
That is Will Jackson. It was a tough decision. I wore it last week. They lost the game, but Jackson had a pick, and you know what? Carson Wentz has been playing a little fast and loose with the football, so we're gonna roll with Will Jackson again and see how it does. Hey, John, big news, man. John Ross, inactive, not a huge surprise if you noticed how the Bengals quickly went away from him after 2 targets, no catches, and some questionable effort on both of those targets last Thursday. What are your thoughts on the receiver situation right now?
So, I mean, everyone was like, okay, this means T. Higgins is starting. He started last game. So he was one of the first 3 receivers out there along with Boyd and A.J. Green. So that movement was already beginning last week. And then when we saw Ross try to get involved in the offense, he, was on like a little drag route and he didn't even look for the ball. The ball was thrown incomplete right at him. There's another one where he went down the field and he didn't work back to Burrow in time. Burrow had to run out of bounds. So there's definite issues that are going on with John Ross right now. And his phasing out of the offense already began last week after he was also pretty unsuccessful against the Chargers in week 1, aside from that impressive catch in the fourth quarter. So I believe Jay Morrison of The Athletic said it wouldn't be very shocking to see Ross be inactive this week instead of Auden Tate, and that's exactly what's happened. I mean, I don't know how much of Auden Tate's agent's involvement has anything to do with this, but also I think it's pretty clear that the Bengals coach staff was phasing out of Ross last week, and this is kind of that whole manifestation of what's going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean, Ross is very fast. And we've seen him make some big plays last year. So maybe this is a signal to other teams. Maybe somebody, comes in asking about him. Because, I mean, the fact is he's in a contract year. It definitely appears A.J. Green had 13 targets last week. It definitely appears like they see him as a big part of what they're doing in their future. And you're not going to spend the money you're going to have to spend on both of them. Because regardless of what Ross has done, like, he runs really, really fast. Like, somebody's going to pay him for that, so he's not going to be cheap coming back. So, like get some value out of him, and we're sitting at 0-2. I don't expect the entire season to look like that, but there's going to be a point where you got to think about the future and think about moving on. And with all the potential free agents, Jackson, Carl Lawson, John Ross, AJ Green, like, they're not all coming back. So you got to be smart and get some value out of that, which isn't something this team has really had a trend of doing in the past.
Well, I mean, and as soon as they declined his 5th-year option in the offseason, we knew that the likelihood of him coming back at all in 2021 was pretty minimal. Either he explodes in this offense and completely outprices himself from the Bengals' perspective, or he has a similar year as he's had in years past, and they're just not interested in bringing him back, which is why they didn't extend that 5th-year option to him. So now everyone's like, okay, maybe put him on the trade block and see what you can get in return. Who's going to give up anything more than like a conditional 7th for John Ross right now? Despite the fact that he is still as fast as he was back in Washington, none of that talent has manifested into anything that's worth any value right now. So for the Bengals to just off him for like a 6th or 7th round pick, they're not getting anything out of that worthy of what Ross still can be. But it's not like any team is going to rationally offer anything more than just a really late round draft pick. So I think he's here to stay. And it's just a matter of week to week if they're healthy enough at the receiver position that he can continue to get opportunities. But right now, unless one of the 4 or 5 guys that are being heavily featured in the passing game at the receiver position fails just as much as Ross does. It's not. I don't know how many more opportunities we're going to get from him.
Yeah, and that's something to consider. That generally, when you're doing those type of trades, it's with the understanding that you are able to sign the guy that somebody's trying to get the inside track and get an extra cheap year out of the guy, unless it's like this is the one thing we need. Like this is that guy, So most of the time with something like that at the receiver position, I mean, you're probably looking at, a team that's had an injury. If the Niners didn't have a million injuries, maybe that would be a good candidate. But like this Julio Jones thing, if that lasted and they thought they were in a position, they're not. But somebody along those lines seems to make the most sense. So let's touch base on last week's game and the Browns. Look, the Browns ran all over this defensive line, this linebacker group. They also, they were playing from behind, but they had quite a bit of success against the Ravens running the football in week 1. So I don't know. I'm kind of sitting here and I'm wondering, number one, look, it's not good to give up 200 yards rushing to anybody, but I'm wondering how bad it is, and I'm also wondering, is the Ravens defense as good as we think? I didn't watch the Ravens in week 2, but the Ravens defense was getting pushed around quite a bit by that Cleveland offensive line, and especially in the running game.
Yeah, and the Ravens defense didn't do much to slow Baker Mayfield down. Baker Mayfield kind of just imploded on himself, despite the Ravens not doing anything really special to try to counter it. It was just the Browns came out in week 2 and had a perfect game plan. Kevin Stefanski and Baker Mayfield executed it perfectly. Baker had one of the best games of his career. It's a lot of play action, regardless of the success of the run, and they just got the Bengals. They caught them off guard with all that. So I think the Ravens had a couple turnovers against the Texans. They're really opportunistic in that game, despite Lamar not having as good of a game as he had in week 1. They still beat the Texans handily. So I think the Ravens defense is still pretty good. It's just a matter of the Browns still have talent on that roster. They have an interior lineman trio of J.C. Treader, Joel Bitonio, and Wyatt Teller, who are playing out of their minds right now. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, I think, are easily the best 1-2 punch at running back. And we knew that they were going to try to get some success there. It's just how bad that it was, compounded on the fact that they were leading the entire game. The Bengals really couldn't do that much to stop it because, the personnel right there lacking. They don't have a lot of defensive tackles. And even if you have Geno Atkins back there, it will make a difference. But that much of a difference for don't score 28 points in that game? I don't think so.
And we are joined by the third member of our crew, Anthony Cosenza. Anthony, how are you doing?
Doing good, guys. A little early for me, but doing all right. How are you guys doing? Interesting news coming across this morning, right?
Yeah. Anthony coming in on California time, of course, as always. Had it easy these first couple of weeks, but now the majority of the rest of the season, we got 1 o'clock kickoffs on the East Coast. That's funny because I literally my cats were just begging for treats, and my wife had to take care of them. So I didn't know if it was yours or mine coming through. But
I gotta show you guys my shirt. I think Matt would appreciate it.
Yeah,
given our age bracket, the old Tecmo one. It's a new shirt. So hoping it brings Bengals a little bit of luck today.
Loving that 8-bit T-shirt. That's great.
Exactly.
That's good stuff there. Right, all you had to do on defense was look at the guy you're playing with his hands and you call the exact same offensive play, and you just get they couldn't
or not play against Bo Jackson, right?
True.
In that game, he
I played a season with the Raiders one time, and if you played as the nose tackle and you hit the slide button and you timed it up perfectly, guaranteed sack every time. And I had 107 sacks in one season with Howie Long.
Wow.
So yeah, we're already talking a little bit about John Ross here once again. Since the whole crew is here, this is the Cincy Jungle Orange and Black Insider virtual tailgate and pregame show. I should come up with a shorter name for that probably. Brought to you by Narragansett. There we go. I'm getting better with this camera. Brought to you by Narragansett. So we have giveaways from Narragansett. They've been kind enough. They've got hats. They've got T-shirts. So any of the tweets that myself, Orange and Black Insider, Cincy Jungle have put out this morning, like and or retweet any of those, and follow our sponsor Narragansett for a chance at winning one of those prizes, one of those giveaways. Definitely some good stuff there. So, hey, look, guys, the big talk about Burrow, there's been a lot of positives with him, but the deep balls are a concern. The touchdown to CJ Uzama was his only completion of over 20 yards on 12 attempts for the season. Is this the week? Is he gonna go off with the deep balls?
Well, think about who he's playing right now. Like their best player in the secondary is Darius Slay, who's not had the greatest start to the season. Otherwise, it's Avonte Maddox and Nicole Roby-Coleman, who I think both guys are pretty exploitable. I'm not even sure like who. I think one is like Mike Epps or something like that. So the personnel for the Eagles is not very good. Like that's one of the reasons why they're getting torched the first 2 weeks of the season so far. Sean McVay had a lot of success getting some of Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee down the field on some plays. So if the opportunity is there today, like he needs to make some of these throws now. And I know the lack of John Ross on the field takes away a dimension of speed. But guys like Higgins and Green and Boyd, they should be able to stack and separate on some of these vertical routes today.
It's a good point about Ross. John and I talked this Wednesday about, the potential. We didn't really expect Ross necessarily to be inactive, but, the whole Auden Tate saga that played out over the last week with his agent. And, since he was a healthy scratch against the Browns, it now looks, since Ross is the healthy scratch, one would be inclined to think that Tate is going to be active and, have a somewhat significant role this week. Like John said, there's the speed element that the team loses with Ross being inactive and the potential deep balls there. But, there's also a lot of size. There's a lot of yards after the catch ability with guys like Tate, Green, and, there's maybe some jump balls that could be had. Just kind of throw it up downfield, have Burrow throw some of those back shoulder throws that he excels at, and let those big guys make a play. And maybe that's where you get some of the explosive stuff. I don't. The other, I think there's a commenter somewhere in here that he's not. I think it's Sterling Sherwood saying he's getting pressure when the ball is snapped. So there's not a lot of time to do these 5-7 step drops and hang back in the pocket and do all of that because of the offensive line issues. So I think there's going to be some opportunities because of the weaknesses that John mentioned, but they're going to need to do something different. And I don't know if this means Ross is kind of done for the rest of the year or if they're still trying to figure everything out, what the best combination of players are. But, hopefully an active Tate maybe brings a little something to the team this week.
Commenter here, Matt Hasselbeck predicted Bengals to win on ESPN. There is also Pro Football Talk out there. Having the goal to predict a Bengals upset. So hey, there's some people that think the Bengals are about to turn a corner and at least get that first W this week. Good to see a little bit of optimism out there. To me, the biggest issue, the biggest concern is that protection. Fletcher Cox was a question mark. He will be active for this game. And as we know, the Eagles have a history of having a really talented defensive line. What do you guys think about that matchup? Is that the biggest concern for you guys as well?
I would say so. I did see an interesting stat kind of to both of the points you've raised, Matt. Last week, or I think was it last week? Anyway, Burrow on 3rd and 4th down, he was like 11 of 14 for 98 yards. He was incredibly efficient on the most important downs, really. And, that's what kept the Bengals in the game regardless of pressure. So if he can continue to be clutch on those big downs, that regardless of the pressure, that's going to be a key to this game. Hopefully, Fred Johnson having a week's worth of preparation and getting some time at right guard and now slated to be there again. Hopefully that means that the offensive line will be a little bit improved as well with the extended week.
You have 4 main matchups between the Bengals offensive line and the Eagles defensive line. You have Jonah Williams going up against Josh Sweat. You have Michael Jordan going up against Malik Jackson, Fred Johnson going up against Fletcher Cox, and Bobby Hart going up against Brandon Graham. Those are like three of those off the bat I can easily favor in the Eagles there. And I know there's some concern about, the protection sucks, so there's just not going to be a lot of opportunities to get these deep balls down the field. A lot of their issues right now are just a lot of timing. It's not Burrow getting pressured and him not being able to have a good platform to throw off of. Burrow hasn't exactly been accurate, and there hasn't been a lot of great communication between his receivers on what exactly where the ball is going to be placed. If the ball gets there like a second too early and it's just not in arm's reach of the receiver's hands. So there are issues with deep balls, but not all of them. Most of them have anything to do with the protection, but the protection is still a big issue today because with Fletcher Cox active, that's going to be a long day for Fred Johnson at right guard, who Fletcher Cox almost exclusively only rushes up against the right guard. Brendan Graham is still getting after the passer. I think Josh Sweat has like an 89 pass rushing grade from Pro Football Focus, and Malik Jackson has like the highest pass rushing win rate according to ESPN's analytics department. So the Eagles defensive line is by far the best unit on that team going up against the Bengals' worst unit on that team. It's not going to affect deep balls as much as people may think it is, but it is going to disrupt the flow on first and second down, which is where their offense is having most of the struggles because they're not being able to run very effectively on early downs and they're not getting as efficient of a passing performance. And that's why you have to see Joe Burrow with his heroics on third and fourth down to keep drives sustained.
Yeah, and I mean it's been a hell of a run, like the defensive lines that this unit has been facing, and absolutely Burrow's missed on some guys. Anthony mentioned the back shoulder throws. There doesn't seem to be that communication. They don't seem to really be on the same page with some of those things. We are joined today. We've got the Narragansett fan hotline. We're bringing in another coach to give us a little backup here, and he has got a very impressive setup. It is Ben Grant. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. How are we doing? It's been the longest week of our lives, it seems, since last Thursday. Man, I can't wait to sit down in front of the TV at 1 o'clock.
Joe Burrow doesn't remember ever losing 2 games in a row, and T. Higgins said he hadn't since like JV basketball. So it must have been a very long week for them. But as I look at all the Argos gear in the background, along with the Bengals helmet, like I say, awesome setup you got there. I gotta ask you about Winston Rose. We haven't seen him yet. What are your expectations for Rose with the Bengals in the NFL?
I like Rose a lot, but I said when he got his shot in the NFL, I kind of saw him as being a practice squad player. He had a great season last year, but was really opportunistic more than anything else. He had a lot of things go his way, and again, he's a terrific athlete, great corner, but he's not really a run stopper. He's a pass first guy, great at judging the ball in the air, and doesn't tend to get beat a lot. That's why I was kind of surprised in camp where he actually was seemingly getting beat over the top, because that just didn't really happen to him in the CFL. And I think maybe that's just an adjustment of speed and stuff. But I didn't think he had the run stopping ability that the Bengals were looking for in that rebuild. I think more they looked at him as a guy that had 9 picks, and they're like, well, that's an area where we need some help, so let's bring him in and see if there's something special there. He can contribute, he can play, but I don't think we're gonna, if he's on the field, something's going wrong. So I'm hoping for him. I'd love for him to get his shot. He's a great guy, but I think the guys that we got out there are better.
The 9 picks aspect, because it was the CFL, like that was something that was talked about a lot, because in the CFL you're guarding like a bigger field with like wider hashes. Like, do you think that that number of interceptions one season is that much more impressive because of those other factors?
Not really, because they throw so much, right? Like there's so little running because it's 3-down football, because you've got that wide field. It's almost an exclusive passing game, and it's still a big number. It's still a ton of interceptions, but he's a boundary corner, so it wasn't, it's not like he's on the field side where there are acres and acres of room. The boundary side is comparable to the field side of an NFL field, but it's still great, but not unheard of.
Well, there are plenty of non-Canadian members of this roster, so we won't pigeonhole you to one topic. But now, we were just talking before. So Burrow has struggled to complete deep balls. It really seems like they were checking in man coverage, trying to get the ball to AJ Green, despite excellent coverage from Denzel Ward. What do you expect in this game? I mean, Slay could be matched up on AJ Green. That's probably the smartest thing for them to do. Do you think they'll move on from AJ? Do you think this is a game where we see some deep ball completions?
I actually like this matchup a lot. Like, aside from, I know you guys were just talking about the defensive line, and wouldn't it be nice if we didn't play a team with where their best unit is the defensive line for a week? But I like the matchup everywhere else. Slay's great, like you said, and I think they're going to try and probably take Green away. But awesome, great. We can use that. Like, Green's going to grind out, maybe 5 or 6 catches, 75 yards or something like that against Slay. But that's where we've got to find opportunities elsewhere. Like, they really don't have any height. You look around their secondary, there's no one else that scares you other than Slay. And this is where Coach Taylor's got to use some creativity, move some guys around, find a way to get T. Higgins matched up on Roby Coleman, take advantage of that mismatch, a size mismatch. Because there's no other corner that I feel can stay with Boyd, that can stay with, or compete with Higgins for height. They just don't have that. And so aside from Taylor moving guys around, and I do want to see a lot more pre-snap motion, using Philadelphia's rules against them a little bit. I imagine, like, I was thinking about this from, coming from like Schwartz's perspective. I imagine we're going to see a lot of cover 3, because I think he probably also doesn't want those one-on-one matchups with Higgins and Boyd. I think he's fine with Slay on Green. But we saw a little bit of they kind of bounced between 3 and 1 last week. And so I expect to see a lot more cover 3 looks, especially against our 5 wide. And, that's where hopefully between Boyd and Burrow, they can just start picking that apart, force them to change it up, show us some man coverage. But, a lot of it all comes back to everything we said before, where if those first 10 minutes of the game don't go in the Bengals' favor, then our game plan's out the window for the 3rd week in a row. And, they can take some more liberties. But, if we can at least keep it close, force them to play aggressively, to, not just completely abandon run defense, then I think we're going to be able to take advantage of the corners. And I love Mixon on these backers too.
A lot of people talked about Tyler Higbee last week. He scored 3 touchdowns at the tight end position against the Eagles offense. And people were equating that, this is like the Drew Sample breakout game. Like, start Drew Sample in your fantasy leagues. What would you like to see from the Bengals offense implementing Sample in the offense more? Because he is that starting tight end, and this is an Eagles secondary and a linebacking group that can be easily exploited with tight ends down the field.
I hope so. And he looked great last week, but that's never really been his thing. And maybe it can be. Like, again, he looked like a great pass catching tight end last week, but he's also never been the guy. He's never had to be. You guys got a fire alarm going on?
That's me. Well, I'm trying to mute myself.
No worries. So he's never had to be the guy. He's never had to, step up and be the number 1 pass catching option as tight end. And obviously, you can bet that Philly's been working on covering tight ends this week after what happened last week. So I actually don't expect much this week from. I don't expect too much this week from Sample, but that's where the other guys have to step up. So we'll see. So apparently, I'm now hosting the show. So with Matt, with Matt and Fire Alarm and everything else going on. But
what's in that chalice, man?
What I got going on here?
Yeah.
Well, so I'm envious of all your viewers that are in Ohio, and of course your viewers that are in the New England area that can just walk down the street to get a case of Narragansett. Do you know how much I had to work to get some Narragansett for today's game in Toronto? It is not easy to get a hold of. I had to call in favors. Almost had to give away one of my children, but I've got some beer ready to go for the game. So
worth it.
I felt I had to represent being on the show today.
Love it. Love the effort.
Yeah. Well, you got. I think Matt, you're gonna have to.
I don't know what that was all about, but
you're gonna have to send me a case, Matt.
So, yeah, of course, the other 24 hours of the day, nothing happens exciting around here, and that happens when we're live on the air. So, hey, flipping over to the other side. So Carson Wentz, once seen as one of the top young quarterbacks in the NFL, as maybe the future of the NFL. And now he's playing a little fast and loose with the ball this year. He's thrown a number of picks. They've got all these receivers who have great speed, but not really connected on those guys. What are your thoughts on the Eagles and that offense? And I'm muting myself.
All right, sounds good. I think those first 10 minutes are going to be big. There's so much pressure on Wentz and the Eagles offense today because you know how Philadelphia is as a city. They are waiting to jump on that team and burn everything to the ground. And so if Wentz feels even still slightly uncomfortable by halftime, I think we've got this game. I think we're in a really good spot. What we can't have happen is let the Eagles establish their running game, have them, see some success running the ball early on, and then allow, kind of like what we saw last week with Baker, where he was coming into the game in a very similar scenario. And so, we can't just let Philly do what they want and then have Wentz make that occasional throw because he's going to complete those. He's a good quarterback. He didn't look good last week. I actually didn't think, like week one, I thought he actually looked okay. He just didn't have any time. He was under heat immediately. Last week, he actually, last week he didn't play well at all. And I think he was starting to feel some of that pressure and feeling like he's got to carry it himself. And it's so important for the Bengals defense to make sure he feels like that, to make sure that he feels that the weight is all on his shoulders and he's just got to get it done himself. And he's going to have to drop back and throw 40 times. And if we can do that, I think we're in a pretty good scenario.
Well, this is normally a wildly professional show, so
I got my kid next to me. He's watching Cars to pregame, so he's laughing. Nice. But hey, Ben, it's Anthony Cosenza. Thanks for joining the program. I just wanted to ask, you talked about some keys to the game, especially with Wentz and what he has been looking like through these first couple of games. Again, I'm kind of the cynical, longtime Bengals fan. I always worry, and you referenced Baker Mayfield and his performance last week. I always worry that the Bengals seem to embody the team that gets another team back on track. When teams are struggling, when, it seems like, the Bengals got this one in the bag, it would seem, they trip over their own feet at times and let a team kind of find its way back to winning ways. Are you worried about that at all this week? Or is the Burrow effect, the clutch gene, all of that, do you think that's going to kind of make the team rise above and get a much needed win today?
Any Bengals fan that tells you they're not worried about it is lying because we've been through it. We've been, it's like dragging a mule through the mud sometimes cheering for this team. But that's what I said before about those first few minutes. It's going to dictate what kind of game it is because we are the perfect bounce back team. Everyone looks at an opportunity to play the Bengals as, well, this is our week to get it back on track. Like, don't think for a second that, like Philadelphia, we're on to Cincinnati. Everyone, I think, is taking that up. That wasn't great. So, this is a game that Philly has had circled as a win, since the schedule came out. There's no one in the Philly organization that thought anything other than, well, this is a win early on for us. We've got this one at the very least. But if we can come out and be aggressive early, maybe get up early, when that would be nice, to go up 7-0, to go up 10-0. If we can do that, the game's over. Philly's going to check out. They're going to have self-doubt. They're going to have their automated booing from the stadium, which I think is amazing. And that's it. And then you're going to end up with a fired defensive coordinator tomorrow. You're going to end up with changes being made, a rebuild. Like, they're on the verge of that. They're just right on the edge. And like Anthony's saying, like, of course, I'm highly fearful of what happened last week repeating itself again, where we allow Wentz to get into a rhythm and suddenly they look like Philadelphia from a couple of years ago, not from last week or the week before. So yeah, I'm nervous. Fingers crossed, but we got to see. Like, hopefully, the one thing that I feel good about is how embarrassed the defense was after last week. They got their pants pulled down on national TV. And I have to hope that as professionals, they're going to show up today and they're going to say, look, like we've got to do whatever we can to stop the run, because we can't have that happen again. And I don't think that's going to be necessarily a season long improvement, but I do think today there's a chance that we may actually stuff the run, because I think the focus this week has to have been, we're gonna be hell bent on making sure Sanders doesn't run all over us like the backs from Cleveland did last week.
It was kind of the perfect storm last week. I mean, you're missing Atkins and Daniels, so you're missing really one of your best players and his backup. So, I mean, especially in a position like defensive line where you value depth, you use your depth. I mean, that snowballs pretty quickly, the problems you can have. Kind of flipping over to the other side, though. So this is a talented but banged up offensive line for the Eagles. And, against that defensive line, do we like that matchup? I don't think they want to run the ball really the same way that the Browns have, that we saw in earlier weeks. That doesn't seem to be their identity. I mean, like, do we think that the personnel matchups are positive?
It's not bad. Like, certainly their offensive line isn't great, but I don't know. I didn't feel like we were able to take advantage of the Chargers' offensive line in week one. And we were more healthy then probably than we are now. I don't know. Like, until I see it, I'm not really sure that that's a positional win for us. It should be on paper. You look at still having Reeder and Dunlap and Lawson coming in, like these guys should be able to, even with a half of Mike Daniels in there, and I guess he's gonna give it a go. But we're gonna end up seeing Covington and who knows who else. I'm nervous about that still, and I think the backers are gonna need to help. And we're lucky that Philly probably doesn't want to pound it down our throats the way that Cleveland did, but they may be looking around at their banged up receiving core and say, well, we don't have a lot of other options here. Obviously, they're going to throw to their tight ends a lot, and that's going to be an interesting test for us, because we did pretty well with Hunter Henry in the first week and stuff, but I think having two guys the caliber of the Eagles tight ends may be an issue. And so that's something, I'd really like to see Anarumo stack the box, get bodies on the tight ends, not let them release, really jam that up and force them, let's go zero. Let's be aggressive, force them to beat you downfield. So force Carson Wentz, who hasn't been able to hit anything, force him to find his receiving core that he hasn't worked with a lot because they've been injured. They're replacement guys. If they can beat you, well, hats off to Philly.
So our guest today, fan of the week, is Ben, who is bringing us red hot takes, setting up fire alarms way off here in Rhode Island. Extremely impressive setup, an incredible effort, tracking down the Narragansett. If only John Ross showed that type of effort when the ball was in the air, we'd have something going here. So, Ben, I think I asked you for like 10 minutes of your time on game day today, and we're sitting at about 15-20. So we'll let you get going with your own pregame routine, but we do appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much, guys.
What's his prediction? What's his prediction?
My prediction, well, it's a Bengals win. My daughter actually picked a loss for the first time today, so she's gonna have to watch from the back deck. But the whole household here, other than her, we feel pretty good about this matchup. I think it's gonna be tight. I got us with a 21-20 victory. So that's my prediction for the day.
All right, awesome. Love those positive predictions. You can't be a Bengals fan if you're not positive. You're not always looking for it. So, all right, thanks again for joining us, Ben. Appreciate it.
Take care, guys. Enjoy the game.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, love the setup. Love the Gansett. Man, he got a full size helmet. That thing was awesome. He brings up a good point about the tight ends. I mean, that's really going to be a test. And these young linebackers, I want them to keep getting reps, but they've definitely struggled. Was that a big time concern for you guys too?
Right. I mean, like Ben mentioned, they only have 4 healthy wide receivers. So Arcega, Whiteside, and Jackson are start. They're going to go out with Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz most of this game, 12 personnel, and that's going to force the Bengals to keep 6 or 7 guys in the box. Force a constant rotation between Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither to supplant guys like Pratt and Bynes, who last week were exposed. Like the Browns passed a lot when the Bengals just had their 2 veteran linebackers out there, and they got exposed in coverage. So the continuation of getting Wilson and Davis-Gaither on the field, throwing them into the fire, see how they react in coverage, that's going to be important because Ertz and Goddard are probably going to get targeted around 15 to 20 times this game, all in that general area. So it's going to take a lot for those guys to step up and play like they've never played before.
The Bengals have traditionally had major issues covering tight ends and elusive backs out of the backfield. It has been a problem for a long time. Even when a defensive-minded head coach like Marvin Lewis headed up the team, they could not figure it out. It coincides a lot with a lot of the linebacker issues and misses in the draft. But I think this is also to John's point, I think it's a big game for a guy like Jesse Bates. Had a really strong game against the Chargers, probably the best of his career, arguably. And then really followed it up with not a great game because he was forced to do more in run support, and that is not his forte. So he had some issues last week, and when guys like Ertz are going to be primary targets this week, I think a guy like Bates and potentially corralling an interception to turn the game, that's going to be a potential big momentum swing if he's able to do it. So I've got some eyes on Bates this week for that reason, and the reason that Wentz likes to go to Ertz. So I think there's going to be a lot of that today.
Yeah, the other thing about the safety position is we might see a lot more dime this week with Sean Williams coming back from injury. That's kind of been swept under the rug a little bit. Williams has not been good at covering tight ends in the past, so I don't know if that directly helps. But I mean, it's definitely a size mismatch. But maybe you're using.
It'll potentially help with the tackling issues, at least.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Maybe you're using Bell in the pass and both those guys in the box. And I don't know. Maybe that means we see less of Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither, who we were seeing mostly in third down situations.
That's a good point. I don't know which linebacker you keep out there on dime. It's just the lone guy. Maybe it's Pratt. He gets the first chance to do so, but I want to see where they put Williams and Bell when they're both on the field. Is Williams the guy closer to the box? Is Bell that guy? I think Bell is best when he is closer to the box like that, and maybe you don't want to minimize the amount of situations that Williams gets up there. So you're right. Like Williams coming back is a topic that we haven't really discussed that much, but could have implications on how this whole entire group kind of rotates in and out in some of these situations.
Yeah, maybe you're playing dime and with Bell in the box and you're you're playing more like cover 2 and having both those guys up top because I think Williams is better there. I've just been breaking down the week 1 matchup. Actually, I'm a little bit behind. I was just breaking down the defense from week 1, and a lot of their dime stuff that they have been running with Wilson was 3 down lineman dime. So they still did have those 2 extra backers. So I mean that's a possibility as well. That we could still see the backers on the field. I think Wilson would be interesting just to see him try and match up on those tight ends. We got a little bit of that with Henry with varied results. I think he had like 70 yards in the game, but we'll see what happens with that. But we're gonna take a look right here at the hit of the week from last week.
And now for the Narragansett High Neighbor Hit of the Game, brought to you by Narragansett. This week's hit of the game is actually a block. After initially blocking the defensive end, Jonah Williams comes off and says hi neighbor to the blitzer. Coming off his initial block, Williams is just in time to save Burrow from the sack, which allows him to scramble and dish the ball off to T. Higgins. This is a ridiculously athletic play by Jonah Williams, and lets you know why the Bengals drafted him in the first round. Although the offensive line has struggled so far this season, Williams certainly has a bright future in the NFL. His awareness and athleticism saved Burrow from taking a huge hit, and that's why this block is this week's High Neighbor Hit of the Game.
All right, reminder to follow our sponsor, Narragansett, and that'll give you that, and liking or retweeting one of our tweets about the show will enter you into our contest, giving away a hat and a shirt from Narragansett. So definitely do that. And I mean, hey, we couldn't give the hit of the week to anybody in the defense last week. You know what I mean?
It kind of says more about anything when the hit of the week of the block.
That's for sure.
I think Nick Chubb had better hits on the linebackers than they on him. So,
yeah, kudos to Matt because he put that hit of the week together, that feature there. So, kudos to you, Matt. But
no, Mike, the volume's working now.
I love that play. I love that play by Jonah Williams. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, as many struggles as the Bengals offensive line has had, you see stuff like that, and there's a real good indication that like he's going to be a dude, you know. And his PFF grade is not great right now, but he's made 2 NFL starts in his career, you know. So just like I said, I want to see more of the linebackers. He's going to get better every single week. He's going to improve, and I think at the end of the year we'll be saying we'll feel comfortable with at least one spot on the offensive line. Look, I know none of us are huge fantasy football guys, but I know a lot of our listeners, our viewers are. I've got a big fantasy football question. So I've got Joe Mixon. I drafted him in the first round because I thought this team was going to be running the ball nonstop. They have not been running the ball well. And I actually drafted Joe Burrow as my backup. I cut Drew Brees because Burrow was getting it done, and it looks like they want to throw the ball all of a sudden. So, I mean, should I keep riding with Mixon, who's underperforming, or should I go with a Deion Lewis or a Josh Kelly, who's just kind of getting more out of his system, even though they're less talented? And open to comments as well here.
Yeah, like it's more the fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, wow, I completely messed that up. But this is the same thing as last year, right? It's just Mixon having an ultra slow start out of the gate. They tried to do some things in the run game early on the season, and they don't have the personnel up front to accomplish those things, so they had to change everything up. Maybe we see something very similar to that this year, where it's the people who drafted Mixon kind of high this year are buying really high, and then they have to adjust and either trade him or offload him for something else. And maybe later on in the season, they kind of adjust things up front, and they face maybe easier opponents, and then Mixon starts to get something going. I think the emphasis to try to get Mixon going early in the game is going to maintain, because now he is getting paid like a top 10 running back. So there's some justifications that need to be made there. But if they can't run the ball, then they're not going to try for 4 quarters. They're going to put the ball in Joe Burrow's hands to make plays, because the running game can. And that's kind of what we've seen for the first 2 weeks.
All right, Steve. Question about Narragansett. Where can you find Narragansett? So Narragansett is a great website. You just Google them, and they click on their beer finder, and you can search by bar, or you can search by liquor store. I almost called it a package store, which is a New England thing to do. But so you could search it in either one of those ways. Just type in your zip code, and it'll let you know. And I went on there like just to see how available it was in the Cincinnati area, and they're like literally all over the place. So you can go on there, and that'll help you out, help you find a Gansett of your own. Yeah, good points. And, you know, people were asking me on Twitter this week about getting Mixon involved. When is Mixon going to be involved in the pass game? I think we're heading there. You know, he had 4 targets and 4 catches for 40 yards on Thursday. Not, you know, exceptional, not anything crazy. But, I mean, that's a good start, and he's productive. And they weren't just checkdowns. Like they're running a handful of option routes with him where he was the primary receiver, where they were trying to get him the ball. So, I mean, are we finally getting it? We've been begging for it for years. Or are we finally getting Mixon more involved in that way?
Yeah, and we go back to the deep passing. There's some opportunities where Mixon can go down the field, and either as a slot receiver, maybe even out wide when they go into a 5-wide set and 11 personnel. We're starting to see Mixon's athleticism utilized better out in space. They tried to do that in the run game last year, but at least in the passing game, where it's almost like an extension of the run game, where it's a lot of throws to the flats, getting him out into space, having to make him miss one guy, and you get a lot of extra yards either after contact or closer to the first down marker. So it's good to see that, especially when your boundary receivers aren't getting a lot of separation against your quarterbacks. Just adds another wrinkle to the offense as a whole. But if you have Mixon and you're paying him this much and you're not getting a lot of things out of the ground game, at least get him out into space like that. I think it's a good start. And if the rest of the offense in the passing game it fails to create explosive plays, then you have to try other avenues. And even though on average throwing to the running backs isn't as efficient as your receivers on average, like if this is how it is right now, then it might be your best option going forward.
All right, we are about 5 minutes from kickoff. One thing I wanted to cover though before we grab a Gansett and get ready for kickoff here, the Steelers. The Steelers are 2-0. And they have beat 2 winless teams. They face another winless team, although I think a better winless team in the Texans. The Texans and the Steelers kind of have reverse schedules. The Texans, came out of the gate with the Chiefs and the Ravens. And was it the Giants and the Giants and the Broncos for the Steelers. So are the Steelers as good as we think they are?
Well, we knew their defense is good, though, right? Because
absolutely.
They proved that last year. And I think as long as they have TJ Watt playing like he is, the defense is going to be the best in the NFL, if not one of the best. Ben is still Ben. He hasn't fallen off the cliff yet. And I don't know if it's close, or I don't know if it'll happen this year. I don't know if we have an injury awaiting us, but as long as Ben plays at a competent level like he is right now, it's not like he's playing at MVP level, but better than Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph. Like, they're going to be competitive. They're going to be somewhere in the playoff race. And yeah, like, the offense is still good enough to put enough points if the defense is playing out of its mind. But, going against Jeff Driscoll and Daniel Jones to start the season, the expectation probably should have been 2-0 for them out of the gate. But, like, they're still an ultra competitive team that's going to finish around the playoff race as long as Ben doesn't fall off.
I will never.
We said to the trend or something gives in that Texans game. Anthony, what do you got?
I will never, ever count out the Steelers. Ever. They're too well run of an organization. They are Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, someone in our live chat said Ben chokes. Ben plays pretty well in big games. I don't know if Ben Roethlisberger has a choker mantra to his career, but I will never count out the Steelers. I do think today, though, Matt, to your point, I think it is a big game in terms of Steelers being kind of pretenders or contenders. But we know, regardless of who's at quarterback, the Steelers will be in the mix till the very end. I mean, they went 8-8 last year with the names that John mentioned. So at quarterback, so they're going to be in it, and it's just a matter of what happens, how far they do go once they're at the end of the season there.
All right, we are about 3 minutes from kickoff. So thank you for joining us on the Narragansett virtual tailgate today, and for suffering through my my half burned down house. But highly professional show we get going on here. Yeah, guys, what do you got? Quick predictions, and then we'll cut you loose.
Anthony, you go, man.
27-23 Bengals is what I've called on the podcast and on the website. So I'm going to stick with that. I think Joe Burrow comes up big today, and I think the Bengals find a little bit more balance on offense. Don't play great on defense, but obviously better than what we saw Thursday. So I think the Bengals squeak one out and salvage what's left of their season.
I've already made 2 completely different predictions this week in this game, so might as well make it 3. Let's go 23-21 Bengals.
Well, you guys seem to be forgetting that the Bengals do not win one-score games. So I'm going to go 24-13 Bengals. We'll keep a nice little distance there. I think they have 2 picks, and they have at least 3 pass plays of more than 20 yards. So we'll take it a step further with that. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Go on, grab a Gansett, get ready for kickoff, and make sure that you join Anthony after the game. He will be right back here on Facebook and YouTube live, taking your questions and talking about what we saw in the game. So make sure you're coming back for that. And Hoo day.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.